This program is brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?
The wilderness is almost ready and prime for tourists as the grass shrivels for a better view of animals in the wild. This is a time that normally sees an influx of international tourists descend onto various African tourism hubs such as the Victoria Falls, the Kruger National Park in South Africa, Zanzibar in Tanzania, the Chobe, Rwanda and Morocco, to mention but a few. While this time would normally be thriving, the current reality only reflects empty lodging facilities, vacant with no visitors, docked ferries that would otherwise be on the waters, carrying tourists overlooking the hippos in the rivers and the watering animals on the riverbanks. The hubs are rife with parked tour trucks that used to travel the wilderness for tourists to marvel at the animals. The shores and riverbanks miss the sundowner's spectacles that once flourished before COVID-19 took control of almost the entire tourism sector. The COVID-19 pandemic has shut the doors of all travel in and out of our country, save for essential travel. Our three major airports in Gaborone, Francistown and Maun are without traffic, with the planes just waiting to take up the skies, quiet as church mice. This has taken away millions in tourism revenue from our coffers, as tourism is the second biggest earner in Botswana. According to an article by National Geographic Explorer and the founder and CEO of Great Plains Conservation, Derek Joubert, tourism alone brings in more than $2 billion in the country every year, employing more than 90,000 people. With COVID-19 having put a halt on almost all economic activity, these figures are also threatened by uncertainty. This, however, is not unique to Botswana, as international tourism has been hit hard by the pandemic. Earlier in April, the Conservation reported that global tourism will shrink by 50%, echoed by the United Nations World Tourism Organization that international tourism receipts could see losses of up to $450 billion. You're watching First Issues. I'm Panata Rongwenya. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. With the cure or plausible treatment for the deadly coronavirus yet to be found and a vaccine at least months away, are we bearing witness to the death of the tourism industry, or are we living through the rebirth of a sector that has thrived for years on end? Our quest for answers led us to the expertise of futurist and founding director of strategic insights firm Tomorrow Today, Graeme Codrington.
One of the industries that is going to be most affected by the COVID-19 disruption is tourism, and that is especially true of international tourism. For Africa, this is particularly devastating because most of Africa's tourism is incoming international tourism. And of course, that has ground to a complete halt now in the second quarter of 2020, as we don't expect any international tourism to be possible. All international flights have been cancelled, and even as flights begin to come back on stream slowly over the next few months, international tourists are unlikely to take the risk of traveling around the world. When will this come back is, of course, the big question that all tourism operators are asking at the moment. And the answer is, unfortunately, we don't know. If we are able to deal with COVID-19, if we're able to deal with the virus, either through a vaccine or through herd immunity or through some other thing that is happening that maybe we're not aware of at the moment, if we, especially in Africa, are able to keep the numbers of infections and deaths low, there is a possibility that in the best case scenario, towards the end of 2020, we might begin to see tourism come back again. If we can get through the winter, the Southern Hemisphere winter, here without too much of an increase in COVID-19 cases, then as summer comes back again towards the end of the year, there is a possibility that we will begin to see tourism emerging. And that, in the best case scenario, may be a very good thing if Europe has done the same thing and the people in Europe are released from their lockdowns and feel the sense of exuberance at having beaten this virus. It might be that we see a burst of activity towards the end of this year for the Christmas holidays. So that's a possibility, but honestly, we will only know whether that's possible towards the end of July and into August. A more likely scenario, though, is that as winter comes in the Southern Hemisphere, that we will see COVID-19 begin to spread. Hopefully, we've done enough in the Southern African countries to make sure that our healthcare systems are prepared and that we have flattened that curve, as we've been saying, and so we are not overwhelmed with cases. But I am sure that we will see COVID-19 begin to run through our countries here in Southern Africa. And unfortunately, I think we will also see a second wave of COVID-19 through September, October, November, and onwards when winter comes back to the Northern Hemisphere. In other words, my most likely scenario is a sad one for tourism in Africa, because I think that the tourism season of 2020 and probably into 2021 is going to be completely and utterly disrupted. That's not good news for tourist operators, and there's almost nothing that you can do about it. But I think that that's the reality that we need to face.
When running a business means
Where did I put that receipt?
we can help you with instant accounting, free software that does your bookkeeping for you. When running a business means
Wait, what do you mean the container hasn't arrived?
we help protect your business from risk with Mohwebi Insurance. And when it means
How do we pay our staff that don't have bank accounts?
we help you make multiple payments directly to people's phones with e-wallet bulk send. At FNB, we're constantly innovating to help business owners at every stage of their journey.
Welcome back to First Issues, brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana. We continue our conversation with futurist and founding director of strategic insights firm Tomorrow Today, Graeme Codrington, as he speaks about the options available to international travelers and airlines in the next 6 months or so. What should be preoccupying their minds?
Tourism operators are going to have to think out of the box, and it might be that there are a number of interesting options. None of these are first prize, and none of these will make up for all of the lost revenue. But I've begun to see conference venues, hotels, and tourist operators begin to shift, and with some creativity and innovation come out with some ideas. One idea, for example, I've seen is if you have a facility that is in a community, one of the big issues that communities have is the disruption of schools. If tourism is disrupted, schooling is disrupted as well. Children are not going to go back to school, or if they do go back to school, are only going back for a few hours, and they are still quite disrupted in their education. Parents who need to work are struggling with how to look after their children and provide homeschooling and care for their children while they also try and get their work done. Whether they're going to the office or working from home, the situation is still the same. So I've seen some hotels and conference venues even churches and tennis clubs, as it happens, begin to open their facilities to provide childcare. Not squashing people in or squashing children into those facilities, but allowing for the physical distancing that is required, and putting a few adults to just supervise the children for a morning or an afternoon, or for a few hours during the day. It's not ideal. It's not ideal for anybody, but it at least is a use of the facilities and something that could be revenue generating. I've seen other places, for instance, the Kruger National Park is offering daily safari drives, now available for free, live streaming, where a real live guide goes out in a car and live streams whatever happens on that drive. I wonder if in a few weeks or months' time, if the Kruger Park decided to monetize that stream, charging people to actually go on that safari, whether that would be an income stream. Of course, not everybody can do that. Some of you don't have facilities that can be live streamed or would gather any interest, but some of you might. And there might be a use for your facilities or for your skill set in a digital conferencing space. What I've also seen is other hotels and conference venues preparing for a possible easing up of lockdown restrictions and an opening up again. And they are beginning to advertise themselves as being able to give the physical distancing that will be required, as having all of the sanitization in place. And this starts not only at the venue, but also picking up from the airport and so on. In other words, it is adjusting. That is the solution. It is changing your mindset of waiting for us to get back to normal, and realizing that what we have for now is at least the new normal for 2 tourism seasons. And after that, I don't think it will go back to normal quickly as well. So I apologize, this is probably not good news for the tourism industry, but we have to recognize the reality of the chaos and the crisis that we are in. It is equivalent. It is the same as what would happen is if we had been in a world war and everything had just come crashing down to a halt. Let's not blame our governments for shutting down the economy. Let's blame COVID, because that is the real enemy and the problem. Let's not blame our governments for shutting down the economy, because even if the government allowed tourism places to open again, even if the government allowed flights to fly, I don't think tourists would come. And the last thing you want as a venue is to have COVID-19 break out at your facility or in your country if you have a mass influx of foreign visitors. So sadly, this is the new reality. It's very difficult for us to see right now in what the longer term view is. We'll have a clearer picture by July. If we are still keeping the numbers low by July, we'll be in good shape for a possible resumption of the tourism industry towards the end of the year. But if we are seeing numbers spiking and infections and deaths growing in July, August, then sadly, I think tourism will be ruled out for the rest of this year and probably most of next year as well.